There's a question if not reading through the data. So one thing to check also is if in Kinect Studio, if this connect to server, it has a red arrow going through. And hopefully that will play the data through Kinect afterwards. Hope that helps. And we'll get started on our second exercise. And if you haven't already, oops, this is the other file. Save this project in case anything happens. Call this TDSW live. And I'll start opening another base comp. In this base comp, I will need two different Kinect data. So I'll split my plane to select the data I want. Select top. And I want to select the color data. Okay, another select. And I want the index. So the color and the index. And again, make sure they're both the same resolution. So I can middle click 1920 by 1080 and 1920 by 1080. And if this isn't 1920 by 1080, then double check that the camera remap is on. And from here, we can get started. And if you have an error on this, it might be because that, but you can still see the visual, the image, you just have an error. It could be that if you're using a non-commercial version, it just limits to a 1280 by 720 resolution, and it's doing HD, but you can first just ignore that for now. And from here, we'll first get the silhouette again, like how we did in the previous exercise, by adding a threshold. And the threshold, and we'll lower the threshold count to where until I see my silhouette. And from here, I'll add a bit of a blur just to smooth out the edges. And let's see how that would look. So I want this to comp out my silhouette. So I'll add a multiply top. And I'll put this on the second input. That's pretty much it. Again, it's a fun little trick, but it's not perfect. You see that you can see like the edges. I'll first put this in the background, put it all out and put this in the background so that I can see the edges. You can play with increasing the blur to make it a bit better. But what I'll also do is add a feedback, like how you see, just to make it kind of part of the visual. So I'll come back here. I'll add my feedback tool from the palette, so image filter feedback. To be honest, it's a bit cringing seeing me constantly jumping side to side. So for now, I'm going to close this up. And I'll hook this multiply to the feedback. And I'll add a blur. So, and since there's a blur, I'm going to recomp this over this. Because right now, if I just play it, everything is blurred, but I just want the movement to be blurred. Let's blur size to 12. and maybe actually lower this feedback down to like 0.8. Now add a over top. I have the multiply in the first input and the blur as a second input. And I'll hook this into the null. Let's see what we got. It feels like I'm going really fast and have this little trail. I'll lower the blur a bit. Yeah, I can play around with the different blur, first blur and the second blur. And we'll just start making the background. We'll make this moving cloud visual. We'll just start off with having a movie file in. And I'll change the file, and I just use the standard test file, the Cloud Ocean 2x times 1K 8-bit TIFF in the TouchDesigner sample files. So just the cloud. And I will add a HSV adjust. Kind of hard saying it really fast. HSV adjust, HSV adjust. And I'll change the value range to, you can play around with any all these parameters, but what I did for the other one, I changed the value range to 0.95 and hue offset to something really high to 102. So it has this pink. Originally I had it to like a red, but my friend said it looked like hell. So I'll change it to 102 and I'll make the saturation to multiplier to -3. No, that's not right. 2.3. Yeah, so it's nice and saturated. I'll displace this, similar technique, what we did in the other background. I'll add a noise top, change the resolution to 1280 by 720. And you can play around with the parameters, what you would like, but I'll change the harmonic gain to down to 0.5, exponent to 2.5, and lower the amp to 0.24. I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear, but my neighbor upstairs have a young child that likes to run around intensely like an elephant. And we'll go to the transform tab and the TX. I want this kind of move, so giving the little motion effect like in this background. So I'll do the expression, the TX to abs time dot frame, and I want it to be very slow, so it'll be times 0.01. Just give it a little motion. You can play around if you want to have it more motion, then you can have it just 0.1, but I think it's a little bit crazy. So 0.01, and I'll add a displace top, pipe it to the second input. They're ready to start seeing some motion, but I'll lower the displace weight to 0.2 by 0.2. So it's a little bit more subtle. We lower the UV weight to also like 0.5. Awesome. I'll add some lines over this. So I'll add a edge top. If you guys don't already know, I like to play with edge and displace a lot. So we'll use a bit of it in most of the exercise. So you can do a lot with edge in this place. We'll add an edge top, and in the edge, I'll change the strength to 9. And I'll change the color to an orange. Maybe I'll do blue too. Stick with orange. And I'll add, later I'll comp this over this. But before I do that, I'll add a displace top. Let's see if I pipe into both inputs. And change displace weight to 0.1.1. It creates a kind of interesting grainy effect. It's optional, but that's what I did in the other one that I was playing around and kind of like this dash stand look. I'll add a feedback onto this. Again, I'll open the palette tools, image filter, drag the feedback, and plug it in. Close this up. And I'll lower the feedback opacity by 0.75. It's a little more subtle. Now I'll layer this over this. I'll get an over top. Put this under. I'll add a null. Call this BK for background. Let's see what we have so far. Cool, cool. One last step, you can keep this as it is, but I'm going to mirror it. So I'll add a mirror top. And cool. And you play around if you want to flip the TX or TY, but I like it the way it is. And I'll just layer this over this. So another over. And pipe this in a second. Turn this viewer off and turn this viewer on. And I'm dancing in this cloud background. Got our second visual. I'll come up, make the operation viewer to be out, and I'll name this green screen. I don't see this. Operate viewer to out. And now the second project is complete. Is there any questions before I go to the third exercise? And let's see what the third one is. Maybe the third exercise we'll do is point cloud. And this will be a little bit more challenging than the previous two. So be prepared, but we'll do some Kinect instancing and 3D instancing, but I'm working with more with chops with this one. And so let's get started. We'll add a base comp. Go into the base comp, and we will first get some of the data we want. I'll flip my pane up. And what we'll be using is the depth. So we'll get a select top, and we'll just drag the select top over. Again, for this doing point cloud to be successful, make sure the camera remap is on. So it's the resolution's 1920 by 1080. Click in the middle to double check. And if that is good, we'll close. Even though we made it to be HD, we're actually gonna down-res it again. But we want this resolution, that 16 by 9 resolution, but we'll down-res this because point clouds is quite taxing on the GPU. And it's also very possible while we're working on in this exercise that you'll see your frame count to decrease. Good thing to note. And I'll also be doing this, that I'll while I'll be working, I'll start closing my viewer, my viewer on the top left corner, and that would help with the frame rate dropping. And also maybe it's good to constantly be saving, especially in this exercise. Control S, just in case it crashes, especially if you're working on a laptop and rather than a machine. Point clouds can be quite hard on the computer. Disclaimer over, and we'll start with having a resolution top after the select. So in the resolution top, we'll down-res it by a quarter. So in the comment tab, the output resolution will change it to a quarter. So now if we little click, the resolution is 480 by 270 rather than 1920 by 1080. And I'll add a null. So what we'll do is use this depth data to give the information to instance onto a geometry. So we want to change this to chop data. So after null, we'll add a top to chop. So if you just automatically right click, there should only be two options, info or top to. So we'll put top to. And now we'll see the data, the RGBA of this, but we just want the R. So we'll delete the R, D and B and A. So now we just have the red data. Cool. And after this, also in the crop, we change this crop tab, change crop to full image, and you'll see a bunch of different lines of the data. And we're going to shuffle this data. We'll add a shuffle chop. And in this shuffle chop, we'll change the method to sequence all channel. And now we just have one data coming. And we'll add a null. Ready here, I'm gonna first close this viewer. Cool. We'll add a grid. SOP, grid SOP. So we'll use this data to be, we'll use this data to use the image onto this grid. But we'll first need to change some of the parameters on this grid. We'll change the size first. So our resolution for this, or the dimension, 16 by 9. And right now this is a square. So we want this also be in the size of 16 by 9. So in the X, I'll just do the expression 16 divided by 9. And now it has a 16 by 9 resolution. And if I select middle click, I see the size is 480 by 270, so that's the resolution. So I'll change the row to be 270 by 480, so every grid will be like a resolution. If I make this viewer active and change to wire mode, I zoom in, you see that there are just a bunch of different 270 rows and 480 columns. If I zoom out, it just looks like a solid block because there's just so many rows. And recenter this. And from here, I'm gonna add a chop to stop, and I will drag this to the chop, and I'll get an error. And if I change the channel scope to R0, which is what this is, R0, and delete everything else, so R0, still have an error. And if we change the attribute to just P2, something's happening. And if I move to side, things happening, and I'll turn on compute normal on, and you'll see something. You see point cloud, but it seems inverted. So we'll go back to this and we'll let's invert this so this can go also be inverted. Already you see my frame count going by half, so I'm gonna start hiding a few things. But after the resolution, I'll add a map top. And I'll change the range. So right now the range, I'll change it to opposite. So let's see first how it is from, I'll change the range to 2 to -1. And that seems to help a bit. But also my body is still like very blocked. And it would help if I change the data to be a different bit. So I'm going to split my plane so you can also see this in real time. Go to the Kinect data, the Kinect. We'll play around with a different pixel format so we can see what we'll do. So right now, let's see if it has an 8-bit flip. 16-bit, did something. 32-bit, okay. And what I did in the other exercise, I did a 32-bit float mono. And 32-bit could be quite taxing on you. So if you're not working a machine, you might even see your frame count going to like 15 right now. And that is normal. And sad, but and we'll use this to instance geometry, and that will be less taxing than having a chop to read the normals of the instance. So we will get a geometry comp. We'll create the geometry that we want to instance onto the points. I'm just gonna just close this so my frame rate's back up. And I'll go into this comp and I will create a few different geometries. Cool. I'll make a box stop. And I'll first just do a box, and then later on we'll can see different type of variations. So let's do it now. So the size will make it to 0.005. 0.005. So they're going to be really tiny because they're going to be little points for the point cloud. So you can barely see it. If you really want to see it, you can click on H in the viewer active. It's still just so tiny that you don't see it, but it's there. Next, I'll add a sphere sop. And I'll make the sphere radius to 0.003. Also very tiny. I'll have also make sure the sphere sop, very important, to make sure the sphere sop, the primitive type to be a polygon. If it's a mesh, it would really, really slow down the network because it just has more points on it. So change the primitive to polygon, and then we'll play with having a circle. So this is the difference between sphere and circle. It's flat. They'll change the radius to 0.001. Tiny, tiny. And finally a rectangle. We'll have the rectangle to be 0.005. 0.005. And I'll add a switch so we can switch between all these geometry. Select them all, pipe it in, and a null. And make sure the null display is on and the render flag is on. And we'll go back up. Cool. And from here, let do some more data to be able to instance onto geometry. Microsoft to grid, sorry. We'll add a, hold on, let me just look at the other, make sure all data. We'll make a SOP2 for the grid. So after grid, right click, go to the chop, and click a SOP2. And we're gonna merge. So we have the SOP2 chop, and we want the TX and TY of this channel. So add a select. Add a select. And I'll just want the TX and TY. Awesome. And I'll get a merge from this and also this data. I'll get a merge. And I'm going to rename this. So right now it's this RO rename this to be depth. And then I'll add a null after this. Make these fewer. Oh, just have this null. And from here, I'll instance onto this geometry. So we have the tx, ty, and depth. We'll turn on the instancing tab, turn it on, drag this null into operator, tx, ty, and we will do the depth, tz, and we see a point cloud thing happening. Cool. So right now it's set, the switch is 0, so it's set on the box. But I want to be able to see the different geometry without diving in every time. So we'll just make a custom parameter so we can slide it in the geometry comp. If you never worked with custom parameters, it's very easy and it's really great, especially if you want to VJ or create custom UIs. What you do, it only works for comps. So base geometries, containers, not regular operators. But if you select the comp, you right click, put customize components, this comes out, and you can make a page and parameters that will be in the parameter box that you want to change. So I'll call this switch, or we'll call this geometry, or make it short, geo. And I'll name this parameter to switch. And since switch is an integer, it doesn't have any decimals, I'm going to change the float to a int and add this parameter. And in default, their minimum range is 0, max is 1, and the default will start with 0. But if I dive in, I see there is 3. 0 to 3. So yeah, 0 to 3, and once it over 3, start having error because it starts with even though there's four geometries, it starts with 0. So 0 to 3. So I'll change the range max to 3. And if I close this up, and you see there is a new option in the geometry comp called geo and a switch, and you can switch up to 4. So what I'll do is I'll right click here, copy parameter. I'm going to split my pane. And if I dive in with this parameter box, I can reference this. So right click, I'll put paste bind. And what this will do is that when you'll see it's purple, if I switch here and I switch here, it won't break. And it's doing custom parameters, you should always do bind and not like a custom reference or other types of pasting. Because, for example, if I just paste this to paste reference and I switch this, it works. But if I switch it from the inside, it breaks and it's no longer binded, or I can't change the parameters, the connection's broken. So I'm gonna paste bind. Now I can move through it and see the different type of geometry. Cool. I'm gonna close this. And I'll add a camera comp, a light comp, and a render comp. So we can render this visual. I'm gonna add a null at the end after render and name it out. And have this as a background so I can see. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's first add a texture. I'll add a mat, a Phong mat, because the Phong, you can get the light. I'll change the diffuse to, you can change to any color you want. I'll make it into a purple and put it onto the geometry material. It's very bright, a little bit lighter purple. Great. And I'll play with the camera angle. I'll just go inside, zoom in. So in the other one, I had this kind of top angle, which I like that you can kind of see the shape more. And it's unfortunate you see all this noise on the side, and that's just because how just the depth data looks like. I'll give you some tricks to kind of make it a little more abstract and smooth it out, the blur. But for now, we'll just find a nice angle that we want. Cool, this works for me. And if you look in this one, so you see there's no, you don't see the background. What I did is I add a feedback and then made the opacity of feedback to 1, so it's just constantly feeding back, layering over and over until all the negative space is covered up. So I'll do the same thing here. After the render, I just like to use the pre-made feedback in the palette box. The feedback, go in between. And I'll change the feedback to 1. And you slowly see all the negative space disappearing as time goes on. And yeah, you can see how right now it's a sphere. This is a rectangle or box. The constant feedback doesn't work as well with the circle and the rectangle, so you can lower the opacity for a circle, but it kind of gives a little bit cleaner look, and you can just comp this over a constant or a ramp. But I'll go back to 1 and change the geometry back to the circle, which was 1, the sphere. And from here, I will add, give some options if you want to make this a little bit more abstract. You can, after the resolution, add a blur. Lots of blurs. And the blur, yeah, you can play around the filter size, and you see how you can make quite abstract shapes with the blur and the particle 3D instancing. So going to play around. Also using different camera angles can create different looking effects. Right now it's a solid purple color. I want to have some type of gradients to it. So I'll add a ramp. Top. Change the resolution to 1280 by 720. And I'll change the top to blue. Why not? And I'll comp this over. I'll add a comp top. And I'll pipe this in. So, and I encourage you to play with what different type of operation, different effects it'll create. And I believe what I did in the other one is like a blur, burn color, but this looks pretty cool. Kind of like this. So think I'll do it with a soft light. And I don't like this negative space over here, so I'll just add another over and put this ramp under it just so kind of hides it. Or instead I'll zoom it in the camera. Nice, nice, nice. The final thing I'll do here is what I did in the other. On the above comp, I made another custom parameter so I can control the blur, the pre-shrink, the filter size, and switch between the geometry on the top level. And I'll just keep it more organized. If I want to visualize it, I don't have to go in and find where's my blur top and where's my geometry to move between the different options. So if you don't remember how to make a custom parameter, we'll do this again. I'll split the plane so I can see what parameters I want to work with. So let me first find the blur. Here's the blur. Parameter. So I want to control the pre-shrink and the filter size. So I'll come up. I'll first make this. Go back to the operator viewer to out so I can see it. Awesome, awesome. And I'll right click and put custom component. And first I want to do the blur. I'll just name this whole page to be custom since there's not that many things. It'll just be the pre-shrink, filter size, and the switch. So custom, I'll name the page custom. And the first one, I'll name it pre-shrink. Or I'll just name it blur pre-shrink. And it will be a float because it will have some decimals. Right? Oh no, I'll keep it with the int. Cool. An int. And let's see what's the range. So the pre-shrink, the lowest range is 1, highest is 8, and it starts at 1. So I'll change the range minimum to 1 and range max to 8, and the default to 1 rather than 0. And the next one, I'll do filter size. So again, it's an integer. It goes from 1 to 32, kind of trippy here. So I'll make this blur filter size. And this one, and I'll have the minimum to be 1, max 32, and default to be 1. Cool. And finally, we'll do, first decrease this back down. I'll get one to control the geometry switch. So the highest is 3, lowest is 0. So we'll do, call it geo switch. And again, int, and I'll add. And the range, I'll change the maximum to be 3. And the default 0 is good. Oops. What happened? Awesome. So I close that up. And now if I see the base, it has a custom tab and have these. So since I'm looking at the geo right now, I'll just first copy the parameter for a geo and I'll paste bind. So it's really cool. There's 2 paste binds going on. So this is binding with this, which is binding with the switch inside. So they're all 3 binded together. And any one I move, why do I have an error? Oh, it has an error because there's no, it's not clamping to 3, but if I go under 3, it's happy, but it's switching this up here. And if I move this, it's switching up here and in there. And next I'll change the blur. So copy the pre-shrink, copy parameters, paste bind, copy blur filter, and paste, bind. And now if I zoom in here, if I move, I can control the parameters here. Yeah, and if you have like a MIDI controller, you can bind this with the MIDI controller if you want to VJ this point cloud visual. And close this up, and let's change this name to point cloud. And from here, I'll see if there's any questions, and then we'll take a break before our last two exercise. Doing pretty good with timing.
Sorry. I'm talk with the technical team to the other perspective. The point cloud part is finished, right?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay,
yeah.
So the second part is finished. Do you have, can you tell me the part 3 plan?
Yes. So part 3, we're doing our last two exercise, and one will be making this noise background visual, and then the last one will be hand tracking interactivity. And then
thank you. The last one is the best looking for things. Okay.
So cool.